Hello, everyone. Sasha, I am the uh, Fudo evangelist at Fudo Security, and I'm really, really happy that you guys are all joining us here today, watching around the world. And I thought this would be a great time to connect some really interesting viewpoints in this time. And without really having to go too much into it, we're in a very, very unusual situation with challenges presented to us by COVID-19 and the virus. And what does that mean? What does that mean for cybersecurity? What does that mean for businesses? So I'm really privileged and very happy to be joined today by some excellent, excellent people. So let me just introduce them very briefly. We're joined today from Amsterdam by Nicole Weyer, who is Technical Solutions Architect at Cisco. Hello to Amsterdam.
Hello to you.
Then we've also got Yotam Gutman, who's Director of Marketing at Sentinel One. He's joining us from Tel Aviv in Israel. Hello. And we've also got Michael Noreko, who is a management consultant in digital transformation at one of the big four consulting firms in London. Hello, Mike.
Hi guys. Hi.
Great. All right, so it should be an interesting session, folks. So I just want to kick off right away. I don't know if maybe Yotam, you want to take the first question. So how are businesses and individuals, how are they kind of, in your mind, how are they going to adapt to this current challenge that's facing our world in terms of everything with security, with business?
It's an excellent question. It's very difficult to predict what's going to be happening in the future, but I can say that from what we've seen in the past 5 weeks, at least here locally in Israel, perhaps some of the nations around the world have joined this trend later. Some have done it earlier. We've seen a forced transformation uh, uh, around all industries, really. So some of the businesses are obviously unable to adapt to this. Almost any business that requires physical touch and presence. We're talking retail, hospitality, tourism. They're suffering right now, and no one knows if they'll recover. Other types of business, like the ones that we're all in the digital realm, I think we're better equipped to cope. We're digital natives, so this kind of conversation that we're having now, you and I, we've had in the past many times, doesn't seem odd. And many people around have joined us and are using Zoom and WebEx on a daily basis. So we've kind of like got a head start on the rest of the industry or industries, and I think we're doing well. In terms of long-term projection, I think this will be a driver to some trends that we've been discussing for the past 5 years or so, like the move to work from home or from remote, acceleration of digital services, and all the other stuff that helps with the infrastructureless world. It's very interesting. I hope that in terms of well-being, this will be resolved quickly and the economy won't take too big of a dent. And then we'll have enough, firepower and ingenuity to see how people will adapt to this.
Mhm. Great. Nicole, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, so who would have thought, right? In January, I just saw this. I mean, of course, there's a lot of jokes going around where the future person, said, if you're traveling, no, you're not. It's like I'm one of those travelers. So who would have thought, I'm not traveling. Um, with that being said, I mean, I've seen in the industry now, specifically all the customers, they all of a sudden, yes, mandatory working from home. And some of them, for them, it's a total mind shift, or because their house is too small, they have a small baby. Uh, Challenges just by itself from that. Yet from the other side, people within Cisco, most of them, it's actually quite normal for us, or we've been doing working from home for quite a while. So for us, it's almost like nothing has changed yet, to the fact that yes, you go out a little bit, well, a little bit way less than before. It gives a lot of challenges, and specifically security-wise, because you see a lot of people inventing new things, new ways. and that's where the consumer products come into play, right? And yeah, that's it's scary, I would say. And let's see how that will, what will happen in 3 months from now, right? If we lose our identity or not.
Indeed, yeah. What about your perspective from London and from accounting? I know you work in digital transformation. So, Mike, what are your views?
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. I think both introductions and context provided by the other two colleagues are absolutely spot on. But I've got a bit of how can I put it? A bit of a maybe a bit of a cynical approach, and that
Okay.
is that I can really see the kind of the global economy going through a really massive restructuring at the moment. And so what do I mean by that? I think we haven't seen anything potentially as bad as this since like the Great Depression, and it's written all over the news. Maybe there's a bit of scaremongering going on from the news at the moment. But in terms of restructuring, I see, for example, the leisure sector, aviation companies are at the moment in a complete shutdown. And what we're seeing is other sectors are potentially more going to boom. So, for example, retail. We've seen a huge run on various produce globally. Here in London, for example, we've got queues outside of supermarkets because people, for some reason, are desperate to get their hands on extra toilet paper. So everything is just being moved around, and this restructuring, what I'm seeing is particularly prevalent around digital-based businesses. So who would have known that Zoom, who virtually wasn't existent about 5 years ago, it was a video conferencing solution that was kind of readily available for tutors and students to connect. All of a sudden has turned into this, Goliath that's just grown and is now competing with the likes of Microsoft and Cisco. So with this, I think there is restructuring happening. It's going to be quite significant, and there's going to be big winners and losers.
I'm going to jump on this, Mike, because I know that there will definitely be some kind of, let's say, opinion on this call about Zoom in particular. So I'm just going to jump and take that next step and go into maybe just the broader dangers of everyone, I think, rapidly surging into web conferencing tools. And as you said, Zoom, a few months ago, we're looking at just a few million users, and it's skyrocketed to over 20 million. It's getting a lot of flack for, I think, their encryption, which just read a few days ago. Some of that goes through China. So at the same time, I think it's a little bit disjointed. So what does that mean? I'm going to, I think, throw it to both Yotam and Nicole just to respond to that. I mean, we are now experiencing more and more of these tools. Let's maybe not focus too much on Zoom, but these tools, everyone's trying to help. But how does security play into that? And how should, let's say, individuals, small businesses, large corporations, like should there be a standard? What should people be really careful about in this?
I'll chime in here. I just tried to think during your pitch, when was the first time I used such conference? And the earliest I can think of was about a decade ago. We've had this web conferencing room at my company, and I used to speak to my Indian colleagues. It was awful because the connectivity wasn't great back then. We did have video, but it froze after a couple of seconds, so I shut it down. They could see me, I could see them. After a while, I thought, well, that's not fair, so I just reached out on the table. I tore out the cable, so we'll be equal. And then the conversation moved on. I barely understand anything. So, yes, technology has, shifted and moved heaps and bounds. The fact that I can do it from my smartphone on the go without paying anything or paying dimes, it's tremendous. I think we should all be grateful that this has happened now and not a decade ago using, the earliest smartphones and no broadband connection whatsoever. But the fact that I've been using this type of software for a decade means that I'm well aware of, the trivial stuff, so I shut the door, I try to lock it so my kids wouldn't run inside. I make sure that there's nothing, obscene in the background. My room is very small. That's the only, uncluttered stuff that you can see. But I make sure that you're not seeing my closet or anything. It's trivial stuff. It's banal stuff. But I think that the general public is not so well aware of it. So we've seen some Zoom bloopers and some mishaps. That's funny. But thinking forward and looking at the way that organizations are using Zoom and government are using Zoom, people should be more aware and more educated. From the trivial stuff of how you conduct a multi-user session to what you say can or can't say. Okay, this is an internet platform. It might be secure, it might not be secure, depending on different aspects of the platform you're using, your predefined preferences, whatever. But you should really take into consideration that someone could be eavesdropping, someone could be recording this call. Okay, and I think the same process of education that has sadly happened to the general public with the use of smartphones and video capturing capabilities. So we all know about hate porn and stuff like that. So people now know that if they'll take an embarrassing photo somewhere and post it online or just keep it on their devices, someday it will leak. I think with time, people will understand the privacy and security issues around web conferencing. And with that being said, I think that the products today are fairly robust. I'm not talking specifically about Zoom. I think they're doing a lot to improve. Also with the other products, there is no software without vulnerabilities. So it's kind of childish to think that we can create a hack-free platform. But if people will adopt best practices, like using a password, you send me a password to join this WebEx, shouldn't be free, right, or openly, and the way that they behave around this conversation, I think it's a reasonably safe tool to use. Having said that, nation state hackers will use these tools to their fullest extent and benefit. We've seen parliament meetings with Boris Johnson, with the meeting ID on the screen. We've seen it all. So they'll definitely leverage that. And this is something that, security governing bodies should take care of.
Mm-hmm. Right. Nicole?
It reminded me of two things, Jotam, is that one of the things, when you see on the television and the journalists and they have their passwords, on the yellow post-it notes on their screen captured, one of those things. But even so, the reason why video conferencing, of course, became so hype, because all of a sudden we are stuck at home and we love to see each other because we love to interact, and just a simple phone call with a voice that the whole world will become miserable might not be the right word, but let's say depressed a little bit and more sad. Can you just imagine, when we had the first Nokia with Snake on there, and if we had the pandemic then, I mean, how much Snake time would we have? But on that one, but it reminded me when one of my first company I joined, I was in the IT department, and the CFO, he went to Hong Kong and he bought this iPack. So for the people that are young enough, that's from Compaq, and Compaq doesn't exist anymore either. So, but it was, let's say, one of the first, let's say, smart devices that you were able to do stuff. From an IT perspective, we hated it because it didn't work. It couldn't install properly, just what Jotam described with the first video conference. And nowadays, I mean, bring your own device. It's sort of allowed, and it just works. All the new applications that are being born today have to be user friendly. Otherwise, you will not have that uptake. Unfortunately, what you see there's no security and user friendliness at this moment is two things that do not go hand in hand very well. If we do have it, then I would cheer for it. And but yes, by the end of the day, the hacker will go for the one that is I would say popular. Indeed. I mean, even Windows, Microsoft. I mean, why did we have so many viruses on Microsoft and hardly on the Mac? Because everybody used Microsoft. There was a lot of game to get there. Nowadays, we are way more equal. So, but people don't still think Apple is not vulnerable to viruses. I still remember one of my friends who were not IT literate. Oh, but I thought it didn't happen. It's like, yeah, well, sorry, wake up.
Yeah. One question also, I think part of one of the narratives from the past, we've already seen kind of just, if we go back 3, 6 months, we saw the beginnings of a type of decoupling and regionalization of a lot of security tools, security policy, right, from the European Union side, United States, especially against China. Um, this is a question to all of you. Do you see now that we are all in this together? I'd like to really believe that it's going to bring out the positive sides of cooperation globally. Will you see, or will we see more cooperation between governments, between security agencies, between cybersecurity tools, or will we are we unable to shake the past and still embed, let's say, these maybe prejudices or warnings and labels, say, oh, wait, that's the Chinese tool, which we've already seen now, right? Zoom being criticized. Or wait, no, you should use this American tool. Will that go away? Will this go more towards, let's say, some open source? I know there's some initiatives around EU that are trying to connect the tech community into making things available more on an open source model. Which way do you see us going in the next few months, just to everybody?
Sasha, I mean, I'll give it a go. Like there's two sides to it. The one side to it is maybe stems from like early modern political thought, which there's a school of thought that states that just like every state globally, each corporation is a rational actor, and as a rational actor in a closed system, you're naturally going to be very, very defensive in terms of what your agenda is, your strategy. You're very competitive, and you're very distrusting of other competitors and other states actors, let's say if it's on a kind of a global level. So there is that part where there is almost inbuilt inherent behavior for states and corporations as rational agents to pursue their own self-interest and not to share any information or any kind of insight. So a part of me believes that that is just going to be the case. You know, when it comes to sharing any kind of data, any information around kind of security measures, everybody will keep their cards closed. However, there is a big opportunity to take complete advantage of big data. If you're looking to really leverage, you know, data science and machine learning capability, you need to have these models that are trained and that can make continuous predictions or classifications, but they need to get massive amounts of data for them to be able to be trained to make those predictions. And that's where the incentive is. If you want to take complete advantage and build a machine learning AI capability for your business to drive automation, to make more accurate predictions, you need to get your hands on data. And that's where you need to start sharing data. So I think if there is the right kind of incentives between corporations and between different states, and those incentives will encourage us to go beyond that inherent behavior, which is I'm in charge of my own destiny, and if I was to share any insights or any information, I will somehow compromise my position, my competitive advantage. So it's all about incentives, I think.
Okay. Anyone want to jump in as well on this one?
I think that continue with what Mike was saying. We've seen and we're all feeling what a disruption in global supply chain feels like, right? So there aren't enough masks, there isn't enough, alcohol or chemicals to perform, all sorts of basic functions. I'm not even talking about, automotive parts for British manufacturers that are stuck in China. Uh, but if I'd like to look at the positive side, is we've learned that we're all connected and reliant upon each other. So we're going to have to build better and more robust supply chains in the traditional sense, but also in the modern sense. And I think we can start talking about data supply chain. And if Israel has a specific data about testing or COVID recovery rates, then it should definitely share this information with institutes and research facilities around the world in order to find a cure or a vaccine faster. Same goes to how you predict how the virus spreads around population. If you have a good, robust data model. We have a very small population of about 8 million. So let's say that we found that this data model works here and it's good. We can then, try to apply it to larger populations if it works there. So I think it is an opportunity for sharing on a global level. And the flip side of it is that we're all vulnerable. So we're using a platform made by specific vendors with servers. I don't even know where this call is routed from. Perhaps Nicole knows. I'm not sure anyone in Cisco knows. And we rely upon that. If we want to talk to Zoom, then we need the U.S. government to maintain the servers that they're out there somewhere, and someone needs to tender the underwater cable. So in order to gain, I mean, you could argue that until 2 months ago, I didn't need anyone. I could just jump on a plane and fly and meet face to face. Well, I can't do that anymore. If I want to get my business continue running, then I have to rely on global infrastructure. And then that gives me, again, chiming back to Mike, that gives me an incentive to help preserve that, even make this more robust. So yes, I think international cooperation, it will start with more scientific side, I think, and it will slowly trickle down to operational and other aspects such as regulation. How can we prevent this from happening in the future? What will be the next best practice if, let's say that it's subsided here, but we have a new patient? Would I allow people from the UK to come in? Would I test them? Would the UK test them flying back? We'll need these protocols in place. Otherwise, the system will not get back to functioning again.
And I just very so quickly, I just want to reflect back on Yotam's point. There's a huge opportunity to take advantage of all the big data that we surround ourselves by. But to Yotam's point, you need to be secure, right? And I think states and corporations as rational actors will only start sharing data, one, if there's incentive, and secondly, if there's security, if there's trust both in the data and in the status of the data. For example, if something's not encrypted or not even, stored on a secure platform, a web server, you'll be even more reluctant to share that data with the counterparty, right? It just makes sense. So, if security isn't there, if certain measures and best practices and governance processes are not followed, we're missing a trick. We're missing a very big opportunity, and we will continuously follow that innate behavior of keeping our cards close and close to our chest. Yeah.
And that's exactly, my mind went all places, like the local people hoarding toilet paper just came to mind. I mean, I think every country has gone through that wave, funny enough. Yet I think in 2040 we'll still have that toilet paper we bought in 2020. But
vintage.
Yeah, vintage paper. But with security, right? I mean, I think the people here on the call, we know what we are saying here. But keep in mind, right? The companies that are now all of a sudden need to work from home, and you are trying to explain, what we are just saying. Some of them, for them, it's mind-boggling, and they will look at you like, what? What do you mean? Or indeed, Yotam, and fair enough, right? Is this call, where is it routed to? Where is it stored? I mean, they even go like, huh? What do you mean? So, or GDPR for that matter, it's a lot of technical words for them, and they just want to click that button, make that video call. I want to give this latest status update if this patient is affected, yes or no.
No. I think you bring up a great point there, Nicole, is like, if I can now segue into kind of the next larger theme here, which is all about the approach to cyber and info security policy now for management, for company boards, for CISOs in particular. And as you said, Nicole, I think if we take a typical right now healthcare worker, on the front lines, these people are pushing and are doing incredible work, and just there's not enough time now to thank them for what they're doing. But they're probably at that point in time not interested in logging in and doing certain verification to get some data, to get some lab results, right? And I think part of the problem in the past, and this is also from my own experience, is that we've had companies release new apps, new versions of devices, new versions of security tools, updated, the interface changes because we have that corporate push, for releasing something new, right? And then adding some new kind of overlay or interface, which then the typical user has to then relearn. And if you're, as you said, many of us here on the call are in some kind of tech space, so already something that we are a little bit knowledgeable about, but the average, let's say, person working in a large corporation might not have that kind of know-how, and it will slow down work. It will slow down how they do their tasks. So sort of my stretch here is, will we maybe see perhaps, and then connecting this globally to the economy, will we see less versions, let's say less updates coming out by manufacturers and vendors for security products perhaps? Or will that look different? Will it maybe become now not just an issue that's important, but maybe also like almost like a national security concern, that everyone needs to be well informed of how to use an interface with different products in their companies? So how will this kind of go into? Will we see industry maybe releasing less? Will it be more accessible? How is this going to look like?
So, actually, if I may just, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
I just the first thing that came to mind, because of course we have many products and there's a train, and I think the shift definitely will be more related to working from home and all those kind of things. So let's say enterprise features, where and as you said, the interface, people don't have time indeed to adapt that quickly to new stuff. But I think there will be a shift in more security, but then also we're more working from home. The ability to make that even better than, and there's an English word and I can't think of it now, but evangelize, make it beautiful like heaven, it's the cloud you're on, something like that. I think that's where the shift definitely will happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And just to build on that point, Nicole, absolutely, we're moving in that direction where there's going to be more kind of digital products being released, more releases more frequently. But as a back current to that, this experimentation needs to be controlled, right? So let's call it controlled experimentation. How do corporations achieve that? It's almost like the rate of innovation is going to go like almost kind of exponentially up. It's going to accelerate. Now that we had this jolt, now that we had this pandemic in the world that made us kind of locked down in our own homes, and we quickly had to spin up instances of WebEx, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, and so on, with thousands and millions of users at the same time, it kind of created this kind of surge of demand for more digital, especially video conferencing solutions. But then corporations are turning around and they're thinking to themselves, oh my God, we need to release feature X, Y, and Z. What's the roadmap? Can we accelerate this? And then somebody in the cybersecurity team would be saying, we need to pen test this. We need to be able to put the right kind of governance processes in place. And they almost kind of restrict that. So the way around that, I think, is kind of controlled experimentation. I think a lot of corporations need to have to create these sandbox environments where data scientists, engineers, business analysts can somehow huddle together and they can experiment, they can create new apps, new solutions, but it's in a very safe environment. So there's no breaches, there's no leakages, no sensitive information is being shared around. So the question is, how do you create this kind of sandbox environment so you can innovate quickly but in a secure way?
I was going to say, it's a great point about this sort of sandboxing and very much a collaborative element, Mike. Do you see this kind of happening on a regional level? I mean, do you see this as you said, a corporation may have the resources to do this, but given the times we're in, do you see this on like a regional level in Europe, perhaps in the United States, or internationally? How do you see this take form?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's already happening, and it's happening in the likes of the Silicon Valley and other tech hubs around the world. London, Tel Aviv, Berlin, and it starts from the tech startup community, because the reason why you get these unicorns, these big businesses that come out of nowhere, is because they experiment and they fail fast through trial and error. but they've got the opportunity and the advantage to do that because there's nothing at stake for them, right? You get some venture capital being thrown your way, a few £1 million, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. That's what venture capital is for. But when you look at FTSE 100, 500 companies, there's a lot at stake. We're talking about, billions and billions of dollars in revenue, and thousands, if not millions of employees, and they're learning from the startup community. How can they innovate in a safe way? So through the companies and the transformation projects that I've been part of, there's already this big push of creating in-house incubators, in-house accelerators, and so it's managed in a safe and secure way. So it's already happening, and it's not just on the kind of on a regional level. Everywhere in London, Tel Aviv, Berlin, there is these tech hubs where you've got big corporates working with accelerators and tech startups, the next generation of unicorns. It's already happening.
That's an interesting point. I think I'll pitch this now to Yotam. I know that you have quite a bit of experience also in the tech and startup area in Israel. But I'm going to start with a slightly pessimistic sort of, let's say, headline, is that just within the last couple months, we've seen like the tech sector, especially digital startups in Europe, take a heavy beating through all this. And I know that you mentioned unicorns, resiliency, but unfortunately, many startups are suffering right now, and that's probably on a very global scale. And I think some of these hubs will really, really come out of this in a very, very damaged state. So how is that view from Israel? And do you see what Mike kind of has talked about in Israel? What's your view on all this, Yotam?
Well, we're certainly feeling the impact. I mean, I work at a global company. Sentinel-1 has an R&D center here with more than 200 employees. So we've kept everyone. In fact, we've hired about 10 people throughout this, and we're still hiring. But a lot of companies have either froze hiring, they've cut salaries, they've sent people home on leave of absence. There have been some layoffs, not massive. Uh, so I think it's really down to the duration of this. If it's gonna last a month or two longer, and we'll see some companies, smaller one, they take a hit. But we'll be okay. If it takes longer, I think we'll see um, a restructuring of the way that the startup landscape works, because investors would not be, they wouldn't want to part their $5-10 million on a company that's not able to survive such a blow. So either they'll only invest in much more mature company, or they'll bundle together to, like massive A rounds or seed rounds. Those companies without sufficient cash cannot survive these crises, regardless of their product and their successful technology. But I'd like to take an optimistic look, and also take a question back to what you said about how we can use this ecosystem to develop more secure products. And one example we've seen here in Israel is that the Ministry of Health, they wanted to launch an application that people can install on their devices, and then they can see if they've been in touch with verified patients. And the first launch was disastrous. I mean, it had tons of security breaches. It obviously was something that they've been working on, and they've made adjustment, and they released it, without the due testing that they should have. And then they stopped. They pulled it back. They hired some very proficient, security and privacy people. They've actually posted their entire code on GitHub, free for everyone to observe and make comments. They've launched a beta version for people to test. They've told people it's a beta version. They've gotten the feedback, they've improved it, and now many people, feel that they can use it. It's been revised, it's been scrutinized by the security community, by the development community. It's definitely, something that's been done in a hurry. Of course, it can be better, but at least in the terms of, pure security requirements, it beats a lot of, polished off-the-shelf applications. So yes, we can use a hybrid model of corporate, in this case also government, and open source and the community to get good products out to market quickly when we need them. I think a lot of corporates looking forward might adopt this model. Some of them are already doing now, launching, community versions for the development community to tinker with before they launch a full-scale version of their product. I think we'll be seeing a lot more of these models. And even if there were to be layoffs here in the tech community, I think we have enough, energy to absorb that into bigger companies. And I have to say it, we've been, on the edge of being a tech bubble here and elsewhere. So deflating this a little bit is okay as long as, people still have money for clothing and food. Uh, Assuming that this is the situation, I think this is a good correction, and at least here locally, the industry will only emerge more mature and robust.
Okay. I mean,
I like to comment on that because indeed in the Netherlands we are also working on an app because we need to. There's not enough testing, right? And in order to win this, you need to have data. You need to make sure what is happening. So that means that you need to see everything basically, which sort of is a challenge by itself again on privacy reasons. And in the Netherlands they are similar. I think the latest in the news was they are down to 7 application builders, and I hope we don't fail miserably like you did. No, not personally did, Jotam, but you did the first time. So because that will be because we are later in the game or now already. So yeah, a time can only tell.
Yeah. One interesting point I wanted to also raise, I think ironically back in the last big financial crisis around 2000 2009, we had some big players that are now unicorns that rose out of the last, and I'm thinking particularly with Airbnb and with Uber. And in some ways, ironically now, those companies, especially Airbnb, are really struggling, and the future has a big question mark ahead of them. So we've all mentioned, or rather, you've all mentioned data and automation right now. So this is to all of you. Maybe you want to start, Mike. Where do you see kind of the next maybe tech unicorn or startup coming out of this once the dust settles and we find ourselves in a very different world in a few months?
Oh wow, that's a really big question. God, I wish I was like the Oracle, like Warren Buffett.
This is
make a ton of money.
time for you to do the Oracle.
What would be the next big thing? I think, I'm really, how about this? I'm really passionate about EdTech, education technology. And this is kind of a sector that I'm following very, very closely. And I can only maybe share my point of view on something that, I've got a bit of passion about. Obviously, I work with other companies in, all kinds of sectors, but this one is particularly of interest to me. And what I've noticed is that you've got the likes of Coursera, Udemy, EDX, Udacity, all these kind of open source, these big platforms that offer courses almost on demand. And what I've seen recently over the last, these 3 weeks, this month since we've been in lockdown in London and the UK, is that there's been this hyperactivity of people sharing their thought leadership, their insights, just like we're doing today, right? And I feel like the platforms that are at the moment, these MOOCs, mass open course providers, is that they're quite limiting because they've been specifically designed for major educational institutions, the Russell Group, Ivy League universities, the likes of Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge. Their proposition is that they'll go to these institutions and say, let's digitalize your content. Let's get your faculty, record a whole bunch of videos, make it accessible to the world. But what about the thought leadership, the insights from individuals like us, that have got experience, that have got insights, and would like to also share that with the world? So what about the proposition where you've got platforms that allow for subject matter experts in a given field to share their expertise on demand with other aspiring professionals? And I think these platforms will naturally evolve and democratize content and thought leadership and insights and knowledge even more. So I can almost see another wave of platforms and applications coming into being that will surpass the likes of Coursera, EDX, Udemy, and so on, and allow us to share content even more seamlessly. Because Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all these kind of social media platforms just do not cater to the needs, right? There's a lot of noise out there. It's almost like it's there for entertainment purposes, but not really for educational purposes. So I would really like to see the edtech sector being disrupted, and I think it will be.
Okay, interesting point. Nicole, now a question to you, seeing as you work for Cisco, a large corporation. Now, as we've already kind of spoken, that we'll see more and more, that already is happening now, transitioning to remote work, and probably most of the company that you work for already has. Um, some probably will find that in some industries, I want to kind of include other industries, are not used to this kind of change. They may not have the technology, or they're now desperately trying to use various, as we mentioned earlier, maybe Microsoft Teams or other tools, and they're just really not ready, and they're going to really be struggling. And I'm thinking of what are, just as devil's advocate now, what are your perspectives on some of the downsides and challenges of remote work? Because we're always seeing the benefits. Yes, it's about cost reduction. Yes, people work-life balance. I'm specifically going to challenge you on onboarding for employees. I'm going to challenge you on motivation of your workforce and your teams. So what other kind of, maybe respond to those, what kind of challenges do you see, and how can we overcome them? How can other sectors overcome them as we transition to remote work, Nicole?
Well, even at although you do work-life balance, is even for those people that are not those companies, industries that are not used working from home, even that is a challenge. So that's not even the working part, right? So the non-working part is affecting there as well. What you will see is, because those companies, they are trying, what do we have? How can we spin this up quickly and get, well, I was about to say get back to normal, but get work done, and so that we can keep the car moving, or keep the factory moving, and not being busy building this whole new infrastructure, which was not properly in place, because that was not a thing at the time, and not needed as such, because people didn't mind coming to work. I mean, if you would have asked them, some of them probably would say, "Oh yes, I would love to." Some people did probably already work a day from home. That was probably then at the kitchen table, and so what you see is that those companies, those industries, trying as quickly as possible, so they grab what they already have, and then if they don't have like a video conferencing system as such, they will think, okay, what is, and then people most likely go from, hey, hold on, I've seen on Facebook that, oh, they have these Zoom calls. Oh, let's install Zoom. Oh, this is handy. Oh, this is great. And so this is how this evolves, right? I mean, literally, it's all about the easy step in, and, oh, you know what? Let's use this, because the level of getting the onboarding is low, and they forget, they expect that security is there. I mean, even with Mike also mentioned about Facebook. I mean, people, some people say, yes, I'm very passionate about security, and then I look at them and I go, and you have Facebook, right? Yes, yeah, stop. So they stop it. So don't go there, right? So, and then they look at you, and then they sort of, okay, then they lower their voice a little bit more down. And specifically, indeed, because where do you get your data from? Just to even from my own perspective, but I think for everybody that is listening to this today, is, the information we are getting. I mean, I always question the first thing, is this real what I'm reading? I mean, specifically now, with the whole virus and with all the data that's coming in and out, is it true? Did it really start there? Is it not something else? And then a first fact check, right? I mean, I always look at the website. Is it coming from The Guardian? I trust it a little bit better than it's coming from whatever, co.uk, or whatever. For that reason, it's like, I never heard of this website before, so why should I trust you? Yes, so it's a roller coaster ride, and we've just started.
Yeah. I want to also kind of move on now a little bit more, and I know it's already coming to our time here. But to each of you individually, I'd like to ask kind of like a two-part question. So, how would you rate and maybe give us an example of what your companies or your regions, respectively, are doing to kind of prepare and adapt to this current situation? I know that's quite a broad question of itself. And then secondly, just very briefly, what is maybe one or two tips or ideas that you can share and give the world and other companies, other people watching who might not be security experts on how to cope with everything going on right now in terms of getting the best arrangement for their companies. So those two. Maybe I'll start with Mike first, and then Yotam, and then Nicole.
Okay, so I think there needs to be a lot more experimentation, and we need to run more hackathons. If anybody's listening to this and they want to understand, how they can experiment, and they've got kind of a mid-sized business or a large-scale business, or they're part of a particular function within the business, try and set up a hackathon. All it requires is for you to go and knock on the door to the IT team, get a couple of engineers, data scientists, business analysts, all in one room, 3 8 hours, come up with a theme, and run it with a view of building something that, the buzzword is minimal viable product, something that can barely stand up, but will give you some kind of an insight. We've started to run, the consultancy that I work. I see a lot of clients now running hackathons with a view of getting this kind of initial proof of concept done very, very quickly. And that way you are on route to building some, really robust enterprise-grade solutions. Obviously, require more testing, security measures being put in place, but then you can just do that, like I said, in a safe environment, in a sandbox environment, and you can do that iteratively and quickly. So that's what I would like to see: more hackathons, more experimentation. And in terms of advice to anybody, get yourself a license with Coursera, with Udacity Udemy. You can learn a lot of stuff just by doing a bit of research. 4 week, 8 week course, and you'll learn something new about machine learning. There you
go. Okay, thanks. Great. Yotam?
So I can only attest to what my company has been doing here in Israel, and it's been the biggest challenge because we have a lot of remote workers as it is throughout the world, but here in Israel we had a large congregation, more than 200 people, and we've actually planned for this. Uh, we've thought ahead. We've had like even a drill, send people home, see if they can, they can connect to all our systems.
Oh, well,
okay. IT department worked overtime. They stocked up. They stockpiled since I think mid-February. They started buying laptops because they knew there's going to be a shortage. And when the day came when they sent everyone home, they took everything from their basement. They took everything to their homes, and they've been, replenishing people and sending them through taxis. People have actually onboarded and joined the company without being in the offices for one day. They get a laptop, they get an onboarding session. Everything is done online. So in that regards, we've been, well prepared. And we're also trying to talk about the exit strategy. How do we come back to the office safely? Both in terms of, procedure, do we do it all at once? And what do we do with all the stuff that we've brought from home? Is it considered contaminated? We have to scan these laptops, reset passwords. So these are all things that we're talking about. And I advise other organizations to start having these discussions. It might be that this is the new normal, and we're going to have to live like that for a long time. But it's more likely there's going to be some hybrid kind of interim period where some people will work at the office, some at home, rotating shift, depending on your industry. As for security advice, I think mainly I will invest in awareness. People I've been speaking to from other companies and people who are experts on phishing and simulation said that there is a massive surge in COVID-19, as they call it in the States, or coronavirus elsewhere, themed phishing emails. So yeah, make sure your employees are aware that all these, notices that they're getting on their mobile phone through other platforms. A lot of these are just fake, others are fake news, and some could really be malicious.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice and interesting perspective. It's that resilience and adaptation that has to be adapted, I think, by any company now. It's a necessity. And it reminds me that on this Gartner survey, I think just a few days ago, one of these experts from Gartner predicted about 35, something like 41% of staff and people just generally in the workforce will be working permanently from home. This is going to be, as you said, a new norm. I like this way you said hybrid, because I think probably one way only working from home might be difficult to imagine on a long-term basis, but certainly the new norm in some way, shape, that we are all sort of now in this, and we have to also do that securely. That's why I think securing, your employees and securing your internal systems, that's so important. That's something that we deal with our company. All right, Nicole, your view?
Yes. So it reminded me even that I was reading about that startups, are even considering, being more remote than rather spending a lot of money on building stuff like that. And who knows, that will be interesting to see and to learn. In our company, I mean, we have 70,000 people worldwide. So it's a big move. I still remember when Europe, it first started with Asia when it was announced that we had to all work from home until further notice. And then EMER came, and literally, I think less than 24 hours, the US people were well, grounded is maybe a bit too harsh, but were asked to stay and work from home. And so in order, they keep us very regular updated on a weekly basis, our leadership, which is I think amazing, because that it feels, at least, it's not the people up there, but they're just one of us, and they're doing the best to their ability. And they haven't laid out an exit strategy as such yet, because I think it also depends per region. So even per country. And I think because some countries aren't there yet, I mean, the peak is still need to come, and or even continents aren't there yet, and some others are already back to work, or back out in the open. So with that being said, so for me, I just watch it from a global view, and what I noticed there is that people take one step at a time, and that's where the work-life balance comes into play a lot, because that it takes a notice. As a tip, I mean, I was listening. I agree with Jotam and Mike. I mean, yes. I mean, now is the time to learn something new. Giving that helps to indeed in a safe environment, because indeed, but be curious about the security implications as well. So if you do, find the new application, that will be awesome. Usability, of course, will be number one on your view, but do challenge the security implications, because, like we started this series, you do not want to have your identity stolen. That's the last thing you really want to have, and that's what I like to end with.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for that, Nicole. And on that, I think that's one of the big things as well that I forgot to mention, is that I think with identity theft, identity fraud, I mean, that's just been skyrocketing as the fastest growing crime globally right now. And I think something around figures of about 5% of global GDP, right? And this is, I think, should be a wake-up call for so many people, no matter where they are, where we are in the world. Security and vigilance, adaptability, checking things. Those are so critical right now, no matter what industry you're in. The only thing that I would maybe add is, it's time now to also collaborate, to connect with people globally. As we've already seen, that's what we're doing. So anyone can do that now. And it's such a wonderful opportunity to, I think when I've said this to a few people before, we are in a point in time right now in history, human history, probably like never before, where we all have something in common. Like we all are in the same situation and everyone can relate to it in some way, shape, or form. And I think that is a very, very unique opportunity that we should use in a positive way for sure. I know that we could probably carry on this conversation for many more hours, and I'm sure that in a few days' time we could have the same discussion, but find new ways of sharing information. But of course, don't want to keep you all here too long. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for you guys tuning in from Amsterdam, from London, from Tel Aviv, myself here from Warsaw. And thank you so much for sharing your insight, your time, also for connecting with each other. Really appreciate it. And thank you very, very much. I hope it was interesting and fun. And for those watching, I hope there was knowledge gained. And I hope it's also not the last time we can connect. So with that, I say good afternoon, good evening, where you are in the world, or good morning. All the best, and thanks, and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sasha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.